evening and welcome to Arab TV. I am Vic Zakur. I'm your host for this evening. The last couple of weeks you were watching our program with Bak Zudi. We talked about Kurdistan, which is the northern part of Iraq. This week we have another gentleman with us, a psychiatrist. His name is Dr. Ali Al Quraishi, and we're going to talk in depth about ISIS, or what they call in Arabic Daesh, and other stuff that's what's going on in Iraq. I want to welcome you, Ali.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming. It was such a short notice, so I really appreciate you jumping into and coming to help me out here.
Of course, no
Thanks.
problem.
Ali has been a guest with Arab TV at least 4 or 5 times in the past,
Yes, I have.
and he has a lot of good ideas. But today he's going to be talking about the situation and the current situation in Iraq. So let's start by explaining to the audience and to the viewers what is Daesh, which is ISIS. So what are they, their origins? Just give me a background on them.
Well, before I get started, I just want to make sure that I tell you that I don't have any affiliation, any religious or political affiliation. These are just my views and not my employers or anyone else I'm associated with.
It's a good disclaimer, okay.
Well, this is a political issue, but the way I see it is a lot more complex than just being political. It's a religious issue, it's a cultural issue, it's an economical issue. So it's really, I think it's very complex and complicated. And although in general we like to simplify things, we want to put a simple and easy way of understanding situations or conflicts. This is, I think, is very very big and very complicated,
Okay.
because it spans many issues.
Okay, so let's start with Daesh.
Okay. Well, see, I think ISIS, the way I see it, started on some fundamental, probably religious ideology that went wrong. This is the way I see it. They started on Islam's ideas, but unfortunately, as any fundamentalist or any extremist or jihadist, as some people call them here, they tend to move way out of even the most basic ideology or understanding of religion, and they go to extremes. I don't see this as much different. I mean, this situation probably has happened many times in the past, and this is what we're seeing, is an extremism and really complete disregard to the very basic rules of the religion.
And what is the relationship then with ISIS and Islam?
Well, I can tell you, as what I know about Islam, ISIS is doing the most damage that any organization can do to Islam. We need to remember there are 1 billion Muslims throughout the world, and you have a minority who are, the way I see them, a bunch of criminals who are destroying really the ideology and the teaching and the understanding of Islam. They're doing such a disservice to Muslims and Islam that they are creating this monster out of a religion that does not teach the violence and the beheading and the atrocities that we see with ISIS.
But they do quote the Quran in implementing what the Quran says and what they're doing, don't they?
They do, unfortunately. But I think this is what is happening, is that they take some very basic ideas from religion, and that they convert it into a very twisted, unrealistic, and extreme ways of doing things. So I think in any situation, in any religion, or any ideology, you can always and very easily twist it in a way that becomes very corrupted, very destructive, really, and causes serious problems for many people.
And then the Muslim world kind of like watch them and doesn't do anything. What is the reaction of the Muslims to what's going on with this group?
See, I think there are two issues going on. Number one, you have ISIS, who are extremely, really are not following what Islam is teaching. And like I said, they're doing a lot of damage. But I think the second part, which is extremely unfortunate, that the Islamic leaders, they're not using this opportunity to express their disdain and dislike and disapproval of what's going on. I think it's very, very important for any person who claims to be a Muslim or an Arab or Middle Eastern person. They have to condemn, and they have to call these criminals as criminals, and don't be quiet about this process. I am not sure what's the reason for being quiet, whether it is fear, whether it is some other dynamics. Remember, there are a lot of issues involved here. Some of the issues are financial, political, some other involvement with whatever the current for ISIS is. But unfortunately, what's not really happening is that the Muslim, the Arab world, the Middle Easterners in general, they staying quiet about it.
You don't know whether it is fear or it is that they just like what's going on.
You know what? I cannot really accept the idea that there is anyone who likes the beheading of innocent people. I don't think there is anyone who would accept this barbaric and very primitive way of doing things. I'm not aware of any, for that matter, for any religion really, just not just Islam, for allowing such a harsh and horrible treatment of people. Now, we're not just talking about beheading men here. We're talking about raping women, raping teenage girls, killing families. Killing. A lot of the small villages in northern Iraq, as you know, were literally destroyed, and the people were left to starve. This is a very barbaric way of handling people.
Yes. And just going to the root of it, Al-Qaeda started, they disowned this group. Mm-hmm. This group got funded, I understand, by some Gulf countries, some Saudi money. Then they got trained in Turkey. Uh-huh. So all the Muslims around Iraq are supporting them, right?
Well, I don't know. I think there are two issues going on. There are leaderships and there are people. Unfortunately, the reality of the whole Middle East and the Arab world and most of the Muslim countries, the leaderships are very corrupt people. So whatever there is, their dynamic, whatever they're trying to achieve, it's very different than the general population who's doing that. And I think this is probably the same with ISIS. ISIS, whoever is in charge and in control, they obviously have their own agenda. And I think the rest of the people that have joined them, they've probably been brainwashed by some ideology that is really not rooted in any acceptable religion or culture or for any humanity really to accept these behaviors.
Yeah, and I understand the individuals who joined them because they got brainwashed or they got, but governments to support them, that is where I find it very, very hard to believe.
Well, that's the unfortunate part. I think in any country, you take a country, you have the people, majority of the people, 99% of the people are hardworking people, and they want to make a good living and they want to live comfortably. But then you have a few government people or political people that unfortunately abuse a situation. And this is, I think, what's happening. I don't know about the specific country that you're mentioning, but I think the dynamic is the same, is that okay. the government abuses their power and their money.
Okay. Now, for our viewers, they know Iraq, maybe they think Iraq is all Muslims. or all Shias. But you know, there is Muslims that are Christian, that are Shias, Muslims that are Sunnis. There's Christians. There is other religions in Iraq. What is the relation between those religions?
Well, unfortunately, I mean, the fact of the matter is Iraq has many racial and religious
Ethnics
groups.
also.
And ethnic groups.
Yes.
And that's just a fact of life. These people have lived together for thousands of years. I think the reality is that whether you can say it is an outside or an inside movement that's trying to fragment the country. I think to fragment a country like it's happening in Iraq, you have to have their own people fight each other. And I think this is really what's happening. You're turning Sunnis against Shiites, you're turning Arabs against Kurds, and then you turn Muslims against Christians, and the poor Yazidis that were caught, you know, we saw that on TV, really have nothing to do with the conflict. They were slaughtered, killed, they were basically starved. So I think the dynamic is that what is happening is that they're using an existing historical, racial and ethnic and religious backgrounds, and they use them to clash against each other. I don't know where that is coming from. I mean, I cannot tell you whether it is Western, Eastern, God knows, or multifactorial, but the issue is that that's what's happening in Iraq. Those people that always live together, they start killing each other. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, that's the puzzle. And another puzzle is I mean, I see that people, let's say, from a village or from somewhere remote, and they get brainwashed, and then they follow those people. But you're having people coming from the U.S., from Britain, from Europe, from Eastern Europe, you know, and joining ISIS. What's going on there?
Well, my understanding is that they have young teenage people or young men mostly joining them. And I think the way they're going about it is that they're using Islam and the teaching of Islam, and they're twisting it in a way that would make them believe that this is the way Islam operates. And I think that if you refer to it as a brainwashing, this is really what's going on. It's a misinterpretation of a religion that's by nature is not violent and destructive as ISIS are. But I think they are using that religion, and then you have people who are, in my mind, who take these things for granted. They're very concrete. They think things in black and white. And they are told this is the way things should be done. And that's what really the unfortunate part, is that they have all these young people joining them. And I have seen, as everyone else seen on TV, where the families of these young people are pleading for help because they didn't realize their own kids would join such a criminal and destructive movement.
Okay. So we know that Iraq is kind of like right now not in the best of conditions, but what is the role of the Arab world? I mean, there's 23 Arab countries all around and they're watching. What's their role?
Well, it's the Arab world and the neighbors of Iraq at the same time. Think about it this way. It seems to me whenever there is a country that is divided and fighting each other, you create an environment to have other interests and other powers abuse that situation. And I think every neighbor of Iraq, unfortunately, do whatever they can to use that situation to their own benefits. And I cannot really exclude any country, to be honest with you, whether it is Turkey in the north, Iran, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Syria. If you really think of all these countries that are neighbors to Iraq, each one of them seems to have an agenda, and their agenda is to fuel the killings of these different sects of the Iraqi population.
Unfortunate. I have about 10 more minutes left.
Okay.
And I have to go through some political issues.
Okay.
And I hope you don't mind that.
And that's fine. I mean, I'm not a political person, but I certainly wouldn't mind talking about
Yeah.
that.
So let me start with after Saddam,
Yes.
things were running during Saddam's time by force, you know,
Uh-huh.
and the Iraqis probably need somebody with heavy hand to get them to do things right. So now we got the U.S. invading Iraq and imposing democracy. And now it's been 13 years with democratic rule. What did we achieve?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, I think I can agree with you. We really have not achieved much, and this is what it's so difficult for us to, as Iraqis, to accept that. I mean, we were very happy to see Saddam Hussein, at least most of us did, because we know he was a criminal, he was a thug, and he killed so many Iraqis. So everyone was very excited about seeing an elected government. I don't think it's an issue of imposing democracy. I think this is something that had to happen. You cannot just have one dictator running the show, getting all the money and all the resources, whether from the oil or the other resources of the country, and going into his own checking book. That was completely unacceptable. Unfortunately, what has come up in the last 13 years is not what we all anticipated, we all wanted. I think it started as a step in the right direction. We were all very helpful. Whatever your background is, we were all hoping that the Kurds and Sunnis and Christians and everyone else, obviously with the majority of the Shia, that they will be able to live together and focus on improving Iraq, both financially, socially, health, all these issues that has to be addressed. I think what has happened in the last 13 years, again, it's very hard for me to admit to say that, it just has been more destruction and more really misuse of power and resources. And it's this fighting that has, I mean, we came close to having civil wars more than once in the last, since 2003. And this is unfortunately what has happened to Iraq.
Yeah, and Iraq is resilient, you know. And, I mean, Iraq always, through the history, has been going through things that was going on now, and then it revives. So now we have a new government. So, and I think personally, when the new prime minister was elected, since his background is a little bit more educated by the West, and I thought, you know, he might or he would be a good prime minister. And just from the outside, I see signs of that, you know. Give us your ideas and how can he unite Iraq and have us, you know, just go out of this problem.
You know, what I see this as playing chess. If you play a game of chess and you are one of the players, you don't really, a lot of times you don't see all the good moves and the good plays. Someone watching you from the outside, you can see the situation in a very different way. I think if you're talking about people like us who have moved out of Iraq and been living in the West or other countries, you can see how this horrible dynamic that's taking place. And I think for us, someone who is educated in the West, or like you say, the prime minister now in Iraq, is that the hope is they can see the global picture, they can see the whole picture. They see how the different parts of Iraq need to move and interact with each other. That's what we're really hoping for, and that's what we want. It's not the idea of just dividing the income and the resources among the different population. It takes more than that. It has to have where you have the vision that a united Iraq is what is needed. This is what, for the best benefit of Iraq, is to have all Iraqis work together. And for us to sit here, we can sit down and talk and discuss these issues. The hope is that for every Iraqi is be able to do that. So the idea is that you can share and discuss and elect people and not behead people and kill each other. Unfortunately, what has happened in Iraq is the way of violence has been what's been dominating. What we're hoping for right now is that a new process takes place. There is more a way of communicating, addressing issues for every Iraqi to be able to see that and address that.
So based on what you're saying, First of all, do you see signs of improvement in this short period that the new prime minister came in, or is it
No,
the old?
he just started the government sort of 2-3 days ago, as far as I know. When he took the power, today is December 15. I think it was 3-4 days ago. But I think the bigger idea, you cannot really depend on one person or the government to do everything. I think Iraqis always look up to a leader or the government to do everything. In this situation, I think the only way Iraq is going to get itself out of this horrible situation is for every Iraqi to start thinking what's the benefit for Iraq, and then you start thinking about for your own people, then your own family and yourself. And I think Iraq hasn't really experienced that in many years, or decades maybe. And I think the hope is that if the government can get their house in order, that the people will follow and will be able to address the differences and their issues.
So there's a hard situation that happened a few weeks ago after the collapse of the army in Mosul. 1,700 young soldiers were rounded like sheep and slaughtered. First of all, why do you think that happened? The second part of the question, who is responsible, and how can those responsible people be brought to the front and to justice?
Well, see, ISIS, I think, and this is something we've been hearing more and more, they're very clever in using the media and fear-mongering and really setting the victims, the way they handle them, the way they manage them, is basically based on fear. So I think there are very few groups that advertise their brutality and the way they do.
True.
And I think the bigger question is, you ask yourself, why are they doing that? Why do they show on their media beheading of an American or a British person? I mean, the reality is this dynamic of extreme, inhumane and brutal, barbaric way of killing a person, it really has one function, is setting fear into other people and into other governments. And I think whatever they're trying to accomplish in Iraq, I think that's the part that's very unfortunate. So when you are saying 1,700 people were slaughtered, it's the same dynamic, whether you're starving a small village, whether you're raping women and killing kids, and it's really the same dynamic, is you're using that fear factor.
And you mentioned the slaughter or the beheading of the American and the British subject, and probably Lebanese, they're going to do it to them too. I think, just my hunch, and tell me if I'm wrong, I think they did the videos for the Americans and the British to drag America and drag British, for whatever reason it is, into this mess.
Well, this is what I'm like you, I hear, I see in the TV and the media, and that's the dynamic that they're saying, is that they want to have the war on their own turf, so to speak. And this is what is going to happen. Unfortunately, I don't see how this is going to end without the superpowers and getting involved with this. We know that. This is what they're trying to do. Unfortunately, I think they're going to accomplish that. This conflict is going to last for years, and I think things are going to get worse before they're going to get better.
Okay, so now let's get back to out of the misery of war into another misery, which is the economical and the money misery in Iraq, where you see a lot in the previous years, a lot of corruption, a lot of people getting bribed. Projects won't happen until you pay, and after you pay, it doesn't happen. I mean, there's millions and billions of dollars went into corruption. And is that going to continue?
Well, I mean, I certainly cannot tell the future. I don't know what's going to happen. But this has been the dynamic in Iraq for many decades, unfortunately. As if the government has the power to collect all the income, really, and in this case, mostly the oil income, and they use it as their own money. I think that's what has happened, and unfortunately, since Saddam has gone, the same dynamic seems to have continued. The people in power control 99% of the resources, and unfortunately, which is very ironic, Iraq is probably has second largest oil reserve in the world, yet a lot of people are very poor and starving and barely get any services.
Well, I mean, yes, you said through decades this has been happening, but not to this extreme. I mean, during even the kingdom, there was bribes. But a project that is $10 million, you probably bribe about $100,000 and the job gets done. During Saddam, the 100,000 became, if you have a $10 million project, became maybe $2 million.
Yes.
In today's economy and situation, the $10 million project gets zero accomplished. I mean, the whole 10 million got swallowed. And I've known people who came from Iraq and said, I did a project for 20 million and nothing happened, you know? What do you mean nothing happened? They didn't do it. They just signed on papers and did it.
You know, unfortunately, I think there is a current mentality that if your neighbor or someone you know is doing that, then it's okay for me to do it. I think that's what's really is happening in Iraq, and I hear this from my friends and family that go to Iraq, is that there is justification for stealing, bribery, and corruption. So as if to say, if my friend Vic is doing it, then it's okay for me to do it. That's what I think is
Okay,
happening.
that's fine, and I'm going to leave it at that. I want to just say thank you very much for coming on this evening, and I want to thank our viewers for continuing watching us. I want also to thank Zaid Faranso, who took over the show for the last year and a half when I wasn't there, and hopefully we're going to have a new host, which is more beautiful than me. So Suad Asfour, she might be taking over this show. So thanks again, and please watch us every Saturday at 5 o'clock, and good night. Thank you for this very good show. Thanks.
Thank you.